Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next video in my Airspeed's Avatar Rewatch video series. This one is going to be for Book 1 Water, Episode 12, The Storm. So this is another JM animation animated episode, and for me, one of the best episodes in Book 1. It obviously brings the run of 3 of the kind of lower rated episodes in the whole series to an end by actually going into, at least for Book 1, one of its better episodes. So that's definitely a huge positive about this episode, that it just is immediately huge contrast to the previous episode as well as the ones before that. So yeah, this is a very important episode because of the flashback that we get for Aang and also for Zuko, in terms of understanding both characters and kind of presenting their arcs to us very clearly. Zuko's one obviously is probably the more impactful one in that we just haven't known up to now really the exact details behind his scar, why he was banished, and this is the episode that explains that to us and really helps us get to know him a lot better. So I like what his side of the story, that they started off with him obviously having issues with the crew, prioritizing his quest to get the Avatar back over everything else, and the crew, who don't know basically why Zuko's like this, don't understand why he's so set on that, basically at the expense of the crew, and Iroh's trying to play peacekeeper. I do feel with this though, this probably should have been the episode where we got it explained to us that the reason Zuko has a crew in the first place despite being banished is because of Iroh. I think it comes across in this episode that the crew is very respectful towards Iroh. And only after this episode, I think, really, I suppose, gain the full, basically commit their loyalty to Zuko. I feel this one should have been the one to explain to us that, you know, this crew basically comes together because they have such a high respect for Iroh and want to basically, you know, travel around with him because he was such a well-respected general. They're not here because they like Zuko, they're here for Iroh. This episode, I feel, could have done a good job just as a little thing at the start to explain, like, just to have the lieutenant guy just say, like, you know, we're here because of you, not him. And then Iroh explains the story. But anyway, the result is that, you know, Zuko's obviously annoyed, he goes off on his own. And Iroh then tells the story of basically Zuko's past to the crew and also to us as the audience. And it's really well done. Just the idea that a younger Zuko wants to attend his first war meeting, because obviously he's the prince, he's going to have to deal with this stuff at some stage, why not get a jump start on it? He goes in there and we immediately see, you know, Fire Nation stuff. The Fire Lord is there, all the kind of key kind of generals and so on. And basically they're talking about Earth Kingdom tactics to fight the Earth Kingdom. And they basically say, let's sacrifice this whole platoon squad of new recruits into the army to the Earth Kingdom so we can do a sneak attack from the back. And Zuko speaks out against this because he's like, no, even though they're new recruits, they are basically performing this role as soldiers because they care about our nation. We can't do this to them. And the slight initially seems to be against this general, and Zuko's kind of willing to actually, you know, fight against this kind of disrespect, fight for what he said against this general. But what ends up happening, obviously, is that Ozai, his father, takes it basically as a slight against him. That you spoke out against this guy in my room, you have to deal with me. And so Zuko has to fight an Agni Kai, a fire duel, against his father, basically for this kind of, basically the fight for his position, more or less, to kind of cure disrespect. He is shocked that he has to fight his father and not the guy he actually had the disagreement with, and so doesn't fight back at all against Ozai, and instead just, you know, tries to apologize. But Ozai basically takes it out on him by kind of doing what I suppose Zuko could have done to Zhao in their Agni Kai earlier on. He burns him in the face, and that's where Zuko's scar comes from. It was given to him by his father, and then after that, because Zuko didn't even attempt to fight back, Ozai banished him with the only hope of getting his honor back being, you know, if he actually goes and hunts down the Avatar and brings the Avatar back to Ozai. So that explains it all. That Zuko's honor is on the line here in this quest, and the only way he will anyway be brought back into things and things will go back to normal for him is if he can find Aang, and that's why he's so desperate. But I like what they do here, in that at the start of the episode they present Zuko not caring about his allies' safety and putting the quest above all else. And then we see in the past him make this decision showing how much he cares about even these soldiers who he's probably never met in his entire life. He cares about kind of everyone. He is actually a kind-hearted person and is willing to put himself out there for that. And then when the storm fully hits, the lightning hits, the helmsman is in danger, Zuko's the first one to jump into action to try and save the helmsman, showing that even though at times if he doesn't act like it, because of how important it is to him, he actually really does care about the people around him. And the lieutenant especially, who has been arguing with him the entire episode, sees that as they save the helmsman, and Zuko makes a decision not to pursue Aang, even though he sees Appa basically right above them. He chooses safety of the crew over this desperate attempt to capture Aang. So it's this big moment of just kind of showing you that, like, okay, Zuko in a way has been changed by what happened, but fundamentally the core of who he was in the past is still there. He still cares about people, and that's very important, which isn't something you can say about a lot of the Fire Nation people. So I like that overall, just that, Iroh, for the sake of the morale of the crew, is kind of just letting them know about Zuko. And then, we get some really cool moments with Iroh here of just like, when the lightning strike hits the boat, he saves the crew from basically a second lightning strike when he redirects lightning, which is the debut of this technique. And it's really like just casually presented there. Like, it's really quick when you watch it. Just, okay, it's clear the ship is about to be struck by lightning. And then Iroh's just like, zoom, zoom. And he's just like, oh, funny, Iroh redirected lightning. And he's like, all kind of slightly charred and like his hair is standing on end. But he redirected lightning. What's that got to do with firebending? So it's this really crazy kind of like reveal of like, oh wow, Iroh has this like amazing technique. And so that was really cool to get as well. And then the only other thing is that when Zuko is doing the Agni Kai against Ozai, we see Azula for the first time in the crowd watching it. And you can see how happy she is that basically her brother's getting burned here. Zhao also watches this, which is why he's aware, and I suppose this was why he is so like, oh, the Banished Prince is kind of like here in episode 3. And Iroh chose obviously to look away as the attack came in. Then on the Aang side of the episode, I like here that it kind of gives the reasoning, okay, like Aang said, like, at the end of like the first couple of episodes, like, why didn't you tell us you were the Avatar? Because I never wanted to be. And we get the explanation for like why that came to be the thing with him, of just that everything changed for his life when he was told he was the Avatar. He used to just love hanging out with the other Airbenders, having all these friends and being included in everything. But when he was told he was the Avatar, and especially it happening at a much earlier age, 12, which they reveal here is because the air nomads sense that a war is on the horizon, which with the context of 306 in mind, is obviously that the air nomads become aware of Sozin kind of planning a lot of stuff in the background, plus his movements into the Earth Kingdom. It's clear that they're aware that like the world is going to enter an era of conflict, and they have to have the Avatar prepared, which is why they inform Aang earlier than he needs to be informed. And I think that's part of it for Aang, that like because he was told when he was so young, because he wasn't mature enough to fully, like if he was 16 and he was told this, I think he would have been able to accept a little bit better the way other people would treat him. But because he's only 12 and he's suddenly shut out by everyone because he's the Avatar, it has a big impact on him, and it is this kind of huge change that he doesn't quite need. And even then, like, the only thing he kind of has left is Gyatso, who's kind of trying to keep things normal for Aang. But then the elder monks are like, no, Gyatso, you're too close to Aang. You're not letting him train enough. You're treating him too much like a father figure in a way. And they just basically want to move Aang on and move him off to one of the other the Eastern Air Temple, is what they say here, to finish his training and separate him from Gyatso. And it's Aang hearing this that causes him to actually run away, get trapped in the storm, and be trapped in the iceberg, saving himself with the Avatar state. So it all works together quite nicely to get the story of just, Aang at a base level is just this fun-loving character who just wanted to be like the best airbender he could be while still having all these friends. And everything changed when he was told he was the Avatar, and he struggled with, obviously, the people he cares about being taken away from him, and him, all these decisions being made about who he can and can't be close with. And you see here in the moment where even when he's telling Katara this, we cut back out of the flashback to Aang getting very angry about this, and he nearly goes into the Avatar state and, causes a bit of an issue with the fire that they have going right there with his airbending. So you can see that this is kind of Aang's character flaw of just how emotional he gets about, issues coming up with the people he cares about. So I think it is really well done. We get some other cool things like the idea of the reveal of the Avatar relics, which are like toys that previous Avatars used, and how Avatars after them will have a natural tendency to also choose that exact toy as something they would like, because to some extent they recognize it as like familiar to them. That even though each Avatar is a unique person, there's still fundamentally a reincarnation cycle, and there is a connection between them and their previous lives. So they found out Aang was the Avatar because he specifically chose toys that were used by previous Avatars, which I think was really, really cool to kind of find out about. And I think even then, like, I'd like to see a little bit more of Aang's life, pre him being the Avatar, just because, like, when we jump in here, there is still a difference between, like, him and the others, and that he has his arrow tattoos at this point and the others don't. He's clearly already, like, 10 levels above basically everyone else around his age. But it's just them knowing that he's the Avatar that separates him from them. It's not the fact that he's like a master airbender now, and he's basically on the level of almost a Gyatso minus the experience. It's not that kind of causes them to go, oh, you can't be involved in their game. It's purely, you are the Avatar now, we can't have you as part of our game because that's unfair. So it's definitely like kids stuff that kind of causes it to happen, but again, Aang is only 12. This stuff would affect him in this way, so I do like it on that level. And I like how a lot of the emotion for Aang in this episode is kind of it comes from the fact that they meet this fisherman guy, and he criticizes Aang. He's one of the first people to actually just kind of in a way be angry at Aang as like, oh, the Avatar's returned. I should be happy about this, but no, like, what about the fact that the Avatar's been missing for 100 years? Where did you go? You turned your back on the world. And obviously we know Aang, like, that wasn't really his aim with what happened. He didn't aim to be trapped in ice. He aimed to just kind of run away, kind of think about what was happening, just get away from all this kind of stress that was happening in his life. And he didn't expect to kind of be in the situation where he was away from the world for 100 years. But you can see towards the end that he kind of blames himself, that, the idea of like, what if I was still there when the attacks came in? Would I have been killed? Would I have been able to help? Would I have been able to save my people or not? And I think I like what Katara says there, in that, it ultimately is kind of fate that didn't happen, because realistically you would have been killed if you had stayed there, and you couldn't have changed anything. So it is this kind of destiny moment in a way, that he ran away and conveniently was out of action while all of this stuff happened. It is a very emotional thing, and that I wish they had brought it up a little bit more. As I said, the connection to like a waterbending arc of like Aang dealing with the loss of his people. I like that it's brought up here, but I wish we'd approached it a little bit more of just kind of showing that Aang really, really does miss his people a lot. That it affects him that he is the last airbender a bit more. But obviously not the focus of this episode, which I completely understand. But the only other thing I want to talk about here is Gyatso. We see Gyatso and Aang playing Pai's show, and we see that Gyatso uses the White Lotus style. Now, does that immediately confirm he's a White Lotus member? Not really, but I think in the very same episode where they introduce Iroh's lightning redirection, which fundamentally kind of comes from a White Lotus philosophy of kind of someone from one nation kind of studying the other nations, the idea of all four nations, the borders between them not being a big thing, and the White Lotus having members of all the nations and kind of learning from each other. I kind of like the idea that, like in the episode where they introduce Iroh using lightning redirection, a technique which is based off waterbending, though it is a firebending technique, just the movements based off waterbending and the philosophy of waterbending, that in that same episode they also introduced the idea that the idea that Gyatso used the White Lotus tile. Now, it doesn't really mean all that much to potentially say Gyatso was a White Lotus member. I'm not sure, but given that we don't know a ton about the White Lotus, like when it was formed, like was it around during Gyatso's time, or is it a relatively new-ish organization? That's something I definitely like to know. But I think I probably would lean on the side of saying that Gyatso probably was White Lotus. That makes sense. I think a lot of when they use Pai Sho, there's meaning behind Pai Sho and where they use it, and especially the White Lotus tile. It makes complete sense why they would do that. Other than that, as I said, overall, really, really well done episode. I like how they kind of split it in that it's just two plots. You get Aang's story, Zuko's story, and then right at the end they come together, and you set up this idea of just like the Avatar being around again gives Zuko hope. And then the Avatar being around also gives Katara hope. And how, at the end of the episode, you have Zuko and Aang in this kind of really peaceful moment in the eye of the storm. Just look at each other. They can't pursue each other because it's such a dangerous situation. But they just have this kind of peaceful moment where they just stare at each other. And it's this idea of, like, what's coming next. And the next episode is obviously the Blue Spirit, where they kind of set up the idea that eventually comes to pass in the series of just, would Zuko and Aang actually not be better off as, friends, comrades, working together? That they could have been friends if things worked out differently. So I think that's a really interesting setup. I kind of wonder, was like the idea of this look meant to be connected with the next episode? But anyway, that has been my review for The Storm. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this episode. Do you rate this as one of the best Book 1 episodes, or what? I suppose actually one final thing, like, is this one of the best episodes of the series overall? I think ultimately, I personally probably wouldn't be able to place it in my top 10. I think the flashbacks are very important. It is a very just overall important episode, but I don't think it perhaps is one of the best. It probably, like, maybe just about makes like a top 15. It comes somewhere there. But I think for sure it's absolutely within the top half of episodes within the series, and probably does come somewhere between 10 and 20, maybe 20 to 25, depending on how you rate the other episodes. But I do rate it quite highly, especially in Book 1. But as I said, let me know what your thoughts are on the episode. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye!